Welcome to Consciously Cannabis. I'm Carly, host of Consciously Clueless, the podcast bringing you this series. Together with guests, I'll be exploring cannabis through lenses of sustainability, mindfulness, and plant-based living. Bonus content from Consciously Cannabis will be available at patreon.com/consciouslycarly. Take a hit, or don't, all are welcome here, and let's get lit. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. I'm really excited to talk with you today.
Don't mind. Thank you for having me.
So, we are on the Consciously Cannabis series. Let's start with your relationship to cannabis. What has that been like for you?
It's been such an evolving relationship. I feel like if I look back to the first time I tried cannabis and what it represented, when I think a lot of people probably feel the same or share similar experiences. When you're young, you don't even necessarily think about what it all means and what it really is and what it represents and its traditional use. When you're young, you're just like, okay, I'm just gonna smoke some weed. Like I haven't tried anything, but I'm gonna try weed and oh, it feels nice and it's funny and I'm bonding with my friends in this silly, lighthearted experience. But I think that over time, I've realized that cannabis is such a special medicine. And I think a lot of people associate like medicine with being unhealthy or needing to fix or cure something, but that's not how I see it. I feel that plant medicines can just help us build on what we already have, help us expand on what we already know. And it's truly something that I see as a great truth teller. I feel that I get inspired when I engage in cannabis. I feel that I'm very connected to the people around me. I've dabbled with it in the solo practice and realized that environment is actually not for me. Like sitting with cannabis, smoking cannabis on my own, it just doesn't feel the same. I feel that when there are others present and it's a bit more of a social atmosphere or environment, it changes. Like the nature of it changes and I feel more tapped in and engaged and I get ideas. Sometimes I just get random downloads and that's I think where the truth serum comes in. And some people have told me the same thing. They've been like, yeah, it is a little bit of a truth serum for me. And even if it is a more social environment, I do find myself oftentimes pulling away and maybe just sitting outside or having a think on my own. And I'm curious to see why it is that smoking cannabis, for example, on my own at home doesn't quite feel the same. I feel very restless if I do it. It's like I don't have enough stimulation around me. I don't know if that's just my body's relationship with it or if there's something to actually dig into and actually understand. But I think ultimately it was a catalyst for my exploration with plants and plant medicine. It opened the door. It really sparked curiosity. And through other experiences looking to improve my health, I've discovered other plants. And yeah, it all culminated and came together and motivated me to take the studies and the education that I have and pivot it towards an exploration of plant medicine and how we can help more people find wellness in different ways, whether it is when it comes to illness or just maintaining a healthy, balanced life, improvement, mind expansion, just all of it. I think that the earth has a lot to offer. And a lot of people here in the West, especially in the healthcare system, have forgotten that the earth has many gifts. And as a pharmacologist, I studied very much like the Western, traditional Western gamut of drugs and of drug therapies. I did take some plant medicine courses. They were electives, but they
That's
were
different
fascinating.
from pharmacology. Just the association with it in my Western understanding is not even including plant-based medicines.
Yeah, they're like electives. And respect to my university for even having the electives.
Well, yeah.
So that was awesome. And I'm glad that I did that because I think that unless I was curious myself to dive in and really understand the pharmacology of plants, I don't think I would have had access to that information. And it definitely really wasn't on my radar. It was only when I saw the course offered, I was like, yeah, I want to do that. I want to know more. It's super interesting. So many of our Western drugs came from plants or come from plants, are synthesized from plants. And just that alone is extremely interesting. A lot of people just think that natural remedies are not evidence based or not based in science. And that's not true. There's so many plants out there that are legal, it can be legally accessed and that are psychoactive and can have an amazing impact on your mind and on your body as well. And I think that it's changing though. I'm seeing it change. I'm seeing the relationship to plants and I'm changed and I'm seeing people fund research. It's just like you need the masses to be interested and then things start to move. And I do think we're there. We're there. People, especially in my area, I think California is very plant forward in general, but I'm definitely hearing more about it and seeing people more interested than ever before.
So when you became
Yeah.
a or started your journey in pharmacology, was that plant-based medicine already there for you? Like, you were like, "That's what I wanna explore," or you're saying that
No.
then you were like, "Wait a second, this is more interesting to me."
Yeah, yeah, it came in later. So I grew up in Montreal and it wasn't in front of me. Like it wasn't in my community. It wasn't like even professionally, it just wasn't around me. I wasn't exposed to it. The training that I had was very Western and the graduate degree that I did and the research fellowship that I did after that, everything was very Western. I worked in the ICU. I worked with traumatic brain injury patients. It was all your run of the mill, regular mental health drugs, just the things that we all know about. And it just wasn't really in front of me. And it was when I moved to California a little later in 2017 that I saw that it was more part of the culture,
Mm,
natural remedies, plant supplements. So it was my own like journey to hormone health. I didn't have a severe imbalance. It was just stuff that women experience or challenges, whether it's skin or whether it's bloating or discomfort or pain related to our cycles. So I was experiencing some of that out of the blue, and I didn't want to go on birth control or I didn't want to change my birth control. I didn't want that kind of journey. And so I saw a functional medicine specialist, and she suggested a blend of Chinese herbs that I was so skeptical about. I just didn't think it was going to be helpful, but it was so incredibly helpful. It changed everything for me. This is a blend that I take still to this day, every day. And that having my personal experience and just seeing the power of the plant was very inspirational. And so then I started to think about, okay, how can I take my background in pharmacology, these experiences that I've had in research, and pivot towards plants and also psychedelics, because psychedelics were part of this exploration and were part of the conversation and the culture as well. I was hearing so many people talk about their psychedelic experiences. We were hearing about this resurgence in research in the medical field with psychedelic therapies. And then the wheel started to spin. And I started pharmacology for a reason. And yes, Western medicine is absolutely helpful to so many people. And I don't want to bash any of that. And I still work in that space. But here's a whole realm that I'm really passionate and interested in. So, how do I pivot my experience and my education to serve that realm and support that realm, advancements, innovations, and yeah, just educate people that they have options, the right to choose. You don't necessarily have to fail the regular run of the mill treatment options before you say, hey, I want to do this instead. I want to try this instead. And finding experts and providers that will support that. It's hard. It's hard to see a medical doctor who's going to say, try this herb blend before a
right.
prescription for birth control. And I hope to influence a little bit, do some practice changing research, and then find some providers that really align and that want to include this type of work into their practice and educate their patients about their options.
I think it's
Yeah.
just such a reminder that we get stuck in that binary thinking, right? Where it is often talked about as like Western or Eastern or traditional
Alternatives. Yeah.
alternative or whatever word gets put in. And this kind of clash of being like you're here or you're there. As I started to learn more and dive into these conversations myself, I'm always like, but can I go to a place for all of it?
And I think the integrative medicine model for like clinics is starting to percolate. I'm seeing a little bit more of these practices, and those practices tend to be very supportive of what you just described. And whether they call it alternative or Eastern or whatever it is, doesn't matter. Label it how you will, but include it in your practice as an option for your clients and for your patients. I just helped open an integrative medicine clinic here in LA, and we're working with mental health professionals, but we are also working with integrative medicine physicians that infuse their practice with acupuncture, with protocols that include like plant supplements and other supplements and nutrition to support the whole person. I think we get a very bogged down by like prescription medication that will fix or band-aid the main symptom that a person might be complaining about. But there are root causes that need to be addressed. And then it's not just root cause, but it's this whole person and the whole person care that I think is lacking in our system, and collaboration between different types of providers with different skill sets. So I hope to see this type of medical model just become more and more popular. I think people need that. They don't want to bounce around to a million places getting this from this provider, this from that provider. It'd be beautiful to have everything under one roof and have people who believe in both the Western and the alternative, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I love that you talk about is the need for education, right? So many people are having these questions or wondering or thinking this can't be the only option I have. But Google alternative medicine and be prepared to be so overwhelmed that you
Oh my
quit,
gosh. Right.
instant quit. And so I love that you want to continue to create education around this that is accessible to people so they can have this power to even bring up these conversations with a provider.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, like, conversations like we're having right now are part of that mission. I want to talk to people who are interested. I want to be able to get the word out to people who are looking for reliable information and information that they can and topics that they can relate to. I try to pitch these types of conversations to conferences as well because I want to access mainstream healthcare. And I have a blog as well, and I just write it for the sole purpose of just getting this type of information out there. I think that research is really important. It really does help change practices. And that's how you do get the word out to mainstream healthcare about all kinds of innovations. And yeah, right now, a lot of my research is rooted in neurology and neuroscience, looking at how psychedelic therapies could support different neurological challenges like spinal cord injuries or head injuries and headaches. But like I mentioned before, my own health journey really inspired this like investment in women's health. And I'm slowly putting together a coalition of women providers that have all different kinds of specialties and relationships with women's health, whether it's on rehab after a certain injury, whether it's fertility and hormones, whether they're physicians or nutritionists or physical therapists, people who essentially have an interest in women's health but also who have a strong interest in finding innovative ways to support women's health and coming together to advocate, educate, publish research. And whether we do it as a full group or whether people branch off within the group to run their own research projects, it all works. But the goal is the education, and you need to reach different types of people in different ways. So like the physicians and the providers, like they're easily reached with research
Right.
and presenting that research at conferences. And then if you're not a healthcare provider and you are potentially I don't know, potentially a person who is suffering from some sort of health, we need to put together like events, educational events, workshops, webinars. Yeah, it takes a village, literally. And I think I'm starting to find some really passionate people who are willing to put in that work. And that's something that I'm really interested and passionate about too. And if we don't do it, then I don't think anything will change. And I want to see the change.
I
Yeah.
appreciate you highlighting that importance of community. I think it inevitably and should come up in every podcast conversation I have, regardless of the topic. There is always a piece that comes back to our systems of oppression are making us try and do these things alone, and that's so silly. Like, how silly. We really need each other, and especially in this space also in this space, it makes sense that the more community you build, the greater and further this mission goes.
Oh my gosh. I always say like community is the foundation of
Mm.
any endeavor. You need people backing you. You need people connecting over the very purpose of your endeavor. And then also, if you're spearheading something, you can't do it alone. Like kudos to you for trying to do it alone, but don't do it alone.
No.
There are people who want to support you. There are people who want to stand by you and help you. And so, yes, and especially if it is an exploration of new territory, or if it's something that is a mental health challenge or health challenge, like you want the support of the collective. Yeah, we do need each other. And I think that the pandemic really reinforced that.
Yes.
Definitely.
So when
Yeah.
say the word psychedelic or
Mhm.
I feel like there are still probably many stereotypes that people have come to mind, and definite like culture shift is happening around that. But what do you share with people when they're like, whoa, psychedelics, like doing drugs? Like when that stereotype comes up, how do you share about this in a different way?
Yeah, it's all about framing it and really meeting people where they're at. I think some people, yes, are like definitely in the loop and more open minded, but other people just haven't been educated yet or haven't just been provided with the information. So I don't fault anyone for having a negative impression. It's just years and years of false information that has infiltrated society, unfortunately. But the information and the education is out there. People are prioritizing that education. And so if someone does meet me with skepticism, I tell them what I know. I tell them that these therapies are being researched for groundbreaking treatments in areas where traditional therapies have fallen short. I tell them that the community is very committed to ethical use and practice. In general, for the most part, people are really focusing on the assisted therapy piece of it, right? So it's not just psychedelics in just by itself, it's psychedelic assisted therapy. And the therapy where you do the deep work is extremely important. And it means that we're not letting people explore if they're vulnerable or they're fragile or if they're going through a difficult time. We're not letting people explore on their own, which could lead to more harm. And I also tell them that I don't think that psychedelics are just meant for the medical or therapeutic container. I think that there's an exploration of plant medicine and psychedelics that you should just be able to engage in. You don't necessarily have to have a diagnosis or a health issue. They're mind expanding. I think that definitely it's not for everyone. So just because you want to try it doesn't mean that you should try it without intention and without preparation. I think some people have predispositions to mental illness that could be exacerbated, and that is a very real thing, and we have to be aware of it. I think that the young minds could be negatively impacted by psychedelic experiences. That's also something that commonly happens. But then, if we're looking on the opposite side of the shadow side of the light side, there's beautiful things that come from exploration with psychoactive and psychedelic substances. And I feel like we, in general, should have the freedom to try them. Don't know what the legal landscape has in store for us, but there has been evolution, and so I think just providing factual information to people is super helpful. It depends on what they're seeking. Do they want to see medical research, or do they want to hear anecdotal stories of people who have found themselves and changed their lives or improved on their quality of life? What do they want to hear? What do they want to know? But there is no shortage of amazing information and evidence that these medicines are incredibly useful for human beings. And I think also the history, that such a rich history with traditional use and indigenous practice. In North America, we talk a lot about South America, we talk about Mexico, but let's go back to ancient Egypt and ancient Greece. And there's incredible history there as well. Myself, I'm half Egyptian, half Greek,
Mm.
and I'm inspired by that. I'm inspired by ancient Greek history and culture, and same for ancient Egypt and the stories that have come out of those pillars of civilization. There's incredible stories about plant medicine and blue lotus, which is a beautiful plant. And so there's so much education. There's so much to share, so many stories to share. And I think that, yeah, we just need, when people are skeptical, I personally have no shortage of things to tell them. But yeah, that's a little bit about, I guess, how I would address it with someone. And it just depends on how long they want to listen to me. Go on and on, because I could go on forever.
I love too that you reminded us of that deep history, right? Because of that colonial erasure makes some of these conversations feel like they're like, have you heard about psychedelics? They're new, right? It's
Yeah,
this
no.
new thing versus there's actually so much history here that came before the whole pharmaceutical industry even existed.
Yeah, and I don't, and as the legal landscape evolves, I don't want to see any of that left behind. There is so much knowledge through this traditional use that we can lean on. And I think we are a lot of people that have questions about effects, like long-standing effects, and how to use, when to use, contraindications, and modern science can answer a lot of those questions. But there are also people who have been engaging and practicing with these medicines for such a long time. And I don't know, I know that I know that there are a lot of those people that are willing to contribute to this modern evolution of this space. But I don't want to see that left behind. I know that there's incredible people doing very integrous work in the underground, and it's scary. It's scary to see laws and policies be formed, because that could mean that they get left behind or they get shut out of the amazing work that they've been doing. So it'll be interesting to see how things evolve. But I know I'm not the only one that says this, but the traditional use, the underground use, just can't be left behind. We need to think of all the people that have been practicing with these medicines for so long. We need to think about the people who are in the underground doing good work, that have been pioneering some of the research and the evolution in this space. And yes, it's all built on ancient practice and ancient wisdom. And then we have discovered, for example, ketamine. Ketamine is an anesthetic. It has a bad rap as a party drug, but it's helping so many people in a clinical setting. I think that it comes from this philosophy that these out of body experiences, these experiences where the mind can travel to places, these altered states can be so useful. And so we've realized that at certain doses of ketamine, you can do incredible work and heal a lot of trauma, especially when, again, traditional medicine hasn't been able to move the needle. There's treatment resistant depression. There's so much rigidity, and psychedelics dissolve that rigidity and allow us to grow. Like, a lot of the work is dissolving these patterns that are dysfunctional that we've learned over time because we've been traumatized or whatever it is, right? Like, we need to be able to unlearn and relearn. And that's this whole thing about neuroplasticity. This conversation is neuroplastic, but psychedelics will make your brain even more neuroplastic and receptive and open. We even call it this critical window of learning,
Wow.
where it's almost like when you're a child and you're a sponge for everything. And the inverse is also very true. If you are open and vulnerable in that way to relearn, and you're not surrounded by the appropriate support, facilitator, and something harmful or negative gets in, the inverse is true. You can regress, you can be re-traumatized. So that's why I think the support system, whether you are engaging recreationally or therapeutically, the support system is so important. You want to go recreationally, dabble in psychedelics, fine. Like it'll be an incredible experience. It will be enriching and full of joy, and it will make your life better, but not if you forget about it after 24 hours. Like I feel like you have a responsibility to yourself. And this goes back to what I was saying to you about cannabis. When you're young, it's okay, like smoking weed, like it's fun, it's funny, I'm giggling. And it's like you're only so mature. Like you're not going to realize that there's actually some profound practice here that you can develop in a relationship with a plant. If you told me relationship with a plant when I was like 19, I would have been like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? But there's a relationship to be had. And exploring these relationships can feel so daunting because you're like, where do I start? What's good for me? What's not good for me? But inform yourself, educate yourself, and then enjoy that journey of finding your relationship with a plant, a psychedelic, a practice that alters your state. You can alter your state. You don't have to be smoking something, ingesting anything. It could just be meditation and dance and movement. You can alter your state and basically trigger all of the neurochemical responses that are triggered with a cannabis or a plant or a psychedelic. You can do all of that just by movement, yoga, breath work.
That's work.
So yes, it's the same. I call it neurochemical jazz, but it's the
Yeah.
same jazz.
I love that.
Yeah. 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 I always encourage people to really explore and to love the process. Don't get so stressed out about which one and how. Just, yeah, that is the process. But that's the beauty of it, is actually getting to a point where you know exactly how, when, and what that relationship is like for you. And that's the power. I think there's great power in altering our state in that way. Better connection to self, better connection to others, more creativity, more focus, less stress across the board.
I think there's something interesting too, for all of us in this culture, that we're often having to unravel the shame around like smoking cannabis or using psychedelics, or that even, let alone we still have shame about talking about our mental health and saying I'm depressed, I'm on antidepressants. Feels like another level sometimes in certain spaces to be like, I'm using cannabis for this, or I'm using psychedelics. Do you think that's still a big piece that people are grappling with?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There is shame and there's guilt. And so the first thing that I think is I noticed we talked about community. People are seeking community of like-minded individuals so they can fully be themselves, express themselves and show up as they are, because people want to be accepted. Our own self-acceptance is rooted in the acceptance of others. It's a total mirror image. People, if you're judgmental of another individual, that's not the other individual. It's usually your relationship to yourself. I've told this story before, but when you're young, let's say 20, in your 20s, you're still discovering who you are. A lot of us girls have our insecurities. We're not pretty enough, we're not tall enough, we're not thin enough, we're not whatever, we're not enough. And I remember, I think we've all had that loop, right? That loop inside of our heads. And society doesn't foster kindness between women. It's very competitive. It's
Some of us, it's the patriarchy, right? Just like one or two chairs.
oh my gosh, tell me about it. Society shows us an example of what a beautiful woman is, for example. And if you don't look like that when you're 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, whatever the age, and even when adulthood, we face these challenges as well. But especially when we're developing as young women, it's these standards that we can never meet, but it fosters competitiveness. There's a lack of kindness. There's a lot of judgment. And what I noticed is when I was around people who were open to cannabis or other, that judgment, that attitude, that competitiveness, it wasn't part of just wasn't part of the environment. I found that people were accepting and people were encouraging and supportive. Even like little things, like another girl looks at you, oh, I love your outfit, I love your hair. It's so small and it sounds superficial, but it's not, because on the inside and when you look at it on a deeper level, if someone can pay you a compliment, it means so much. It means kindness, it means lack of judgment, it means security, self-security, it means openness. And I was just noticing that the people who engaged with psychedelics, the people who engage with plants, with cannabis, they tended to be those kinds of people. And I remember the light bulb moment that was like, what's the difference? Like, why is it that I'm out at a party and people are just so much nicer? What is that? And you begin to seek community amongst those like-minded people where there is no judgment, where there is no shame. And I'm not talking about drug use that is mindless and not that doesn't serve a higher purpose. I'm talking about like responsible mind expanding use. And even if that means having a good time with your friends, like great, joy is amazing. We all need it. So back to the question about shame, it's still a thing. And again, I think it comes down to educating people. And you might never want to try a psychedelic. Like that might never be something that you want to do, but it doesn't mean that you can't learn about it and try to understand it. Even amongst people who use psychedelics or that smoke cannabis, because it's not accepted across the board on a federal level or across the world, it's still like people are still coming around. There's still shame. You might engage in it and you might have a great relationship with it, but you might still feel shame. You might want to hide it from your coworkers. You, let's say you went out and you had a really great time and it was all beautiful, but like you're tired the next day, like hungover maybe from whatever you ingested. And there's shame. Makes you feel low. It makes you feel like, oh, I'm not productive. Oh, I'm so tired. My head hurts. Why did I do that? Why do you feel shame? Think about it. You got to get to that root. And even with, we talk about MDMA has such a reputation for making you feel fried the next day.
Interesting.
I think it's twofold. I think it's like a chemical thing, but I also feel that people might have something to dig into there on an emotional level, right? Like, why do you feel this way? Is there something that you should be exploring, processing? Just feel like we need to be very in tune with what we're feeling. And instead of just chalking it up to, oh, I stayed up so late. Oh, my coworkers, they won't like the fact that I smoke weed. Dig into that. What does that mean? And I think that's what we call integration. It's like, how do you take lessons from what you do and just apply them to your life? But the shame thing is real. It's real. And I don't know if there's like like a real answer to that. It's like, it's your personal relationship with yourself. And if you're feeling shame, ask yourself why and go from there. Don't just sit with the shame.
I think is related to something else you talk about, which is creating a ritual. And I love that conversation because for me and my relationship with cannabis, sometimes I'm smoking weed with friends, sometimes I'm just smoking weed because my hip hurts. Other times it's like actually like a part of a ritual, a whole morning, a whole juicy moment that I have. It's a part of journaling and yoga and all of this and all of the things. So what does creating a ritual with these different substances mean to you?
It goes back to creating a relationship, right? So there should be intention, I think, behind everything. If you mentioned if you're smoking it to journal because you feel like it helps you field ideas and channel ideas and gets you closer to your emotions and your thoughts, then that in itself is a practice or a ritual. It's betterment at the end of the day. Like it's serving a greater, higher purpose for you. If it's to manage pain, there's an intention there. Like it's rightfully. I think that cannabis and a lot of these plants help us tune in a little bit deeper. I think that we need that sometimes. It's one thing to be able to tap in, go deep, and be very connected to our feelings on our own. But sometimes there's a deeper exploration to be had. And it's very clear that plants like cannabis can do that. Some people want to be closer to source. Some people want to be closer to source or God or to some sort of higher power. And they feel that by altering their state with cannabis, they create a pathway to access that source. For some people, source is music and it helps them be more creative. But I think overall, what we're seeing is that the ritual is to better your quality of life. It's to better yourself. And why not? Why not seek that betterment at all times? I feel like we should be evolving um, as human beings, and rituals do help us
Right.
evolve. Puts us more in touch with ourselves, with our emotions, with other people. But it's funny because, like for me, I was telling you, if I smoke cannabis, I can feel very inspired, very social, engaged. I can get ideas. I can get downloads from the past. Can't play the piano to save my life. It is the craziest thing. My piano teacher once was like, just smoke some weed. It's going to loosen you up. You're going to have such a great practice. Oh my God. Okay. So not only can I not play piano, but I'm clumsy. I drop things. Yeah, it's so bizarre. So like my mind body connection, I feel into my body, but like dexterity gone. Like it's crazy. And so here's another point to developing your own relationship. Through exploration, you'll notice like how is it helpful to you and how is it not helpful to you. So note to self, if you want a productive piano session, Steph, don't smoke weed to play the piano. It's not going to work for you.
I love you bringing up music, something that's important to you as a part of this equation as well, and the healing and the interconnectedness of all of it.
I think when we're talking about altered states and all of these different practices, music falls right in the center of all of this. What a way to feel connected to yourself. What a way to tap into your emotions, connect with other people. These music festivals, I think, are so fantastic because people are there for the same reasons. They're there to hear and experience the art, and that forges connection. And there's so much expression from the artists themselves that are performing, but also from the festival attendees. Like they're there to express themselves as well. And I think that's such a beautiful environment to be in. Dancing is so good for the soul. I think music is great for the soul. And at the end of it, I feel like we're talking about joy and happiness as well. And I've been doing this talk with my friend and colleague, Jane Garnett. She's a therapist. We've been doing this talk called The Chemistry of Joy and just talking about how there's such a gap between healing and joy. People associate healing with brokenness, but we are trying to approach the entire subject from wholeness. And to be whole, you need yourself, but you need others too. You need the collective, you need the community. And music does bring joy. And even if music inspires feelings of sorrow and sadness, you need that in order to access joy. It's like the yin and the yang.
I love that. And again, with the binary thinking, right? Like where it's like you're either having a good time or you're having a bad time. Like you're either experiencing joy or you're experiencing grief and working on your healing. And I've had to do a lot of work in my own reframing of seeing how all of those things can be true at the same time and how they actually need to be true at the same time in order to move forward instead of just the like, now today I'm healing. Maybe tomorrow I'll see some joy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. It's not linear. It's not black and white, in my opinion. There's so much in between, but you need both at the end of the day. Like you need to, as human beings, the human experience is highs and lows and everything in the middle. And I think that if you're grieving and healing and struggling, it's obviously, we don't wish that upon anyone, not ourselves, not our friends, not our families. But having been down and going through the process of digging ourselves out, I think is huge for growth. And being on the other side of that, basking in the light and the glory of joy, creates more gratitude and appreciation. And talking about practice, I don't think I understood till I was an adult, like a truly formed adult, what gratitude was and what the difference between gratitude and appreciation was, and that gratitude is a practice. And it's not something that can be forced. And I think you have to learn many lessons in life and experience many things to truly step into a place where you are practicing gratitude from a very deep seated, genuine place. I don't know what you think about that.
I'm
Yeah.
a yoga and meditation instructor, and mindfulness and gratitude has been like on the awareness level, but I don't think I truly understand or understood its power until I started including gratitude as a part of my practice, becoming a ritual. I started writing in my little morning routine 3 things I'm grateful for. It doesn't matter what they are, it doesn't matter how big or small, it's a part of my morning routine, and it has become one of those powerful things I think I do daily. And I can call on it in such a different way to that distinction between, like, appreciation and gratitude. Understanding gratitude is a different level of mindfulness. I'm still working on it. It's forever a
Yeah,
prac
I think it is forever a practice. And I think that I don't know how it is for you, like how you feel when you smoke cannabis or however you partake. But I get these moments of just deep gratitude. Like it's like clockwork. There will always be a moment where I zone out and I'm just
Yes.
thinking about the things I'm grateful for. And sometimes you do need like an outside source that could put you in that mindset. If you struggle to attain it and reach it on your own, I feel like creating a ritual with a plant could really help. I feel like all channels are just open. You have this, it's such a heart opener for me. It is a it's a mind expander, but cannabis falls within heart opener or heart opening for me. And I think about others like cacao and kanna, which is a South African plant. It is also a heart opener. And in terms of psychedelics, MDMA is definitely a heart opener. And people sometimes struggle with understanding what the very meaning of heart opener is, but it is everything that we've mentioned so far. Deep gratitude, it's non-judgment, it's self-acceptance, it's compassion, and it is a very real thing that as humans sometimes we have difficulty tapping into all of that on our own. And if we can create ritual with a plant or a practice that helps us tap into our hearts and experience everything that I just mentioned, then why not? I had someone once tell me something like MDMA feels phony to me because I'm just bubbling with love and appreciation for the people around me, but I'm not really like that in my everyday life. And I said, but it's not someone else. It's you. That's your experiencing. Those are your feelings. That's your heart. That's your experience. So what I said after that was maybe it's not a phony, disingenuous experience. Maybe it's just showing you what lives within you already. We don't need any of these to experience joy. But if we do experience joy through all of these different practices, it shows us like how much power we have to recreate that on our own and that it's accessible. And people who are really struggling in their lives with their mental health, and I'm thinking about PTSD especially, it could be so very helpful to create joy with a practice like this, with whatever it is, whether it's MDMA or another plant or another practice, because they have a hard time accessing that joy and compassion for themselves. So why not give them a tool to show them that they can experience it and that they can do it? And then they can work on recreating all of that mindset, that feeling on their own. I don't think that any of these should be seen as a crutch. They're tools.
And then that path gets more worn and it's easier to
Mhm.
access.
Exactly. Exactly. Those pathways become just available for you to walk down whenever you want. Yeah. A lot of the research right now, I look at it under this like lens of how do we include as many people as possible in research, right? It's you look at the things that burden society and you look at where again traditional medicines have fallen short and that people are just going round and round in circles trying to find solutions. And with this whole resurgence of psychedelic medicine, I think one of the main things that we're seeing is that it's not a band-aid solution. So that's how it differs. And I think the same thing with cannabis, because there is such an effect on one's mind. If you're smoking cannabis for your pain and you have chronic pain, for example, that is going to wear on your quality of life. And most people who have chronic pain or chronic illness or severe illness, they have a mental health challenge because their everyday life is affected. And there's an opportunity here to take this substance, whether it's a psychedelic substance or cannabis or another plant that has a psychoactive effect. There's an opportunity to say, okay, this isn't just going to manage the pain or the symptom. It's also going to support your mental health because your mental health is very woven into this health challenge that you're experiencing. And when cannabis became accepted as a medical treatment, I think there was a bit of a failure that the psychedelic community is trying to avoid. And that's the education and the advocacy and demonstrating to people that it's not just about the effect that it has on your body, that there's an effect on your mind and there's something to integrate there. Because cannabis isn't just like helping your pain, it's altering your perception. And I think that a lot of people who are taking cannabis to manage their pain are bypassing that completely. And it's not their fault, right? They're not told that there's an opportunity to integrate. They're not told that while they're sitting there smoking their weed for their pain, if their mind wanders and starts to go in certain direction, wait, there might be something for you to do with that very thing. Write it down, explore. In the ER, for example, they give ketamine to help with pain, stabilize fractures. They use it in surgery. There's typically been very little prep giving ketamine to patients in this circumstance. Now, ketamine is being used as this mental health drug, and there's a ton of prep happening, but you're still giving that same drug in the ER to someone, and their mind is about to travel, and you're not prepping them. And I think there's an opportunity there. There's some people that have told me that since they've learned about the mental health effects of ketamine, the positive effects that it could have, they've started to prep their patients. The patient's there with a dislocated shoulder or like a fracture. And before they give them the ketamine, they just explain to them. You don't have to go too deep. You don't have to get spiritual with them if you don't feel like that's where they want to go. But you can just tell them and prepare them for what's going to happen and tell them that actually they should try to use this moment, right? And if something profound comes to them, they should try to hold on to it. And this whole paradigm shift is, I think, one of the most impactful things that's coming from the reprioritization of plant medicines and medical practice, of psychedelics, all of this. It's showing the entire healthcare community that it's more than just symptom management, that the whole person needs support, and that if you're going to be giving a substance that alters one's mind, it shouldn't just be lost on them. It doesn't matter if it's just for your pain or if it's or whatever it is. There's something more to it, and we should never just let that be lost on them. And this is going into what I was going to say with women's health. There's so many different psychedelics right now that are being researched to support women's health because they've noticed that, especially the psychedelics that play on your serotonin, so that's your mood stabilizing neurotransmitter, estrogen increases the number of receptors for serotonin. So that means a lot of different things. That means that as women, we can be more sensitive to certain plants or psychedelics depending on where we are in our cycle. It also means that for women who experience a lot of symptoms around their menstrual cycle, PMS or PMDD, which is a very severe PMS, there's actually an opportunity here to support them with some of these psychedelics. And ketamine is one that is really being looked into because it interacts with another neurochemical called glutamate. And when our estrogen levels decline in our menstrual cycle, in our luteal phase, that could actually be a contributing factor to PMS and PMDD. It's this dip in the estrogen. And ketamine actually activates estrogen receptors and can increase the estrogen levels. There's a lot of this research, even with women who give birth by C-section are more susceptible to postpartum blues, because when you give birth by C-section, you don't have the same flooding of oxytocin and serotonin and dopamine than when you give birth naturally. And so they've noticed that coming in at a strategic moment with ketamine, which is very short acting and fast acting and is out of the body within 12 to 24 hours, could support women who have postpartum blues or are more susceptible to postpartum depression. And they did a study as well with, I think, almost 700 women. And so again, the point here is it's okay. So we're trying to manage these symptoms, but they're very much tied into our mental health, to our quality of life, to our human experience. And so it's not just about how does the psychedelic help mitigate the pain or how does it help mitigate the symptom. It's more, it needs to translate to more. And I think that's like a big message that psychedelics and psychedelic therapies and all of this research is showing us. And I think that a lot of people who advocate for these therapies are really advocating for this very thing, that it's more about the entire person, that it's about their quality of life. It's about the integration and how you change. It's a lifestyle change. It's not just like a pill for a symptom, a medicine for a symptom. It's more than that. Yeah.
That's really beautiful. I know that there will be listeners who want to know more or that inspires them. I deal with endometriosis and am currently one of the people that you maybe referenced in the beginning of like on birth control, just till I didn't want to go back on it. I'm on it because I was struggling so much figuring that journey out. But like the connection between plants and hormones and that whole body health is something I know that so many of us are looking for more information about. And everything you're talking about is so needed. And there's such a thirst for that knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And again, a lot of our health is tied to these neurochemicals that I mentioned, even cortisol. And so finding different ways to modulate all of that, not just with drug therapy. It could be drug therapy, but it can also be paired with different practices and activities that further help modulate these neurochemicals. And eventually, hopefully, it does lead you to gaining balance again. But I've written a couple of articles on my blog. You can find it on beyondthebench.life. There's some articles about women's health. I have a newsletter you can sign up for, and I send resources when I find things that are interesting. I just send it out to subscribers. And if you want to contact me, if you have any questions, you can also do it through the website, through the contact form. It's look at beyondthebench.life. Yeah, I'm always happy to share resources. And I do some coaching when it comes to finding relationships with plants. It's something that I'm passionate about. And if I don't have the answer, I have an extensive network of amazing providers that might. So I'm always happy to share.
Thank you for sharing that. I hope we can connect again in the future. I love finding people that you can have these authentic conversations with and that it feels so good. So thank you for that today. It's been really lovely to learn from you.
Likewise, I hope we get to talk again soon.
Thanks for listening to an episode of Consciously Cannabis. If you're not ready for this episode to be over, don't worry. Every Consciously Cannabis episode has bonus content. Sometimes guests and I will smoke together. Maybe you'll see some of my friends and I toke up. Who knows? Go to patreon.com/consciouslycarly and get all the bonus content. And thank you so much for listening to this new series. If you enjoyed it, remember to hit subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. Share it with a friend. Tell someone you know. Anything helps, and I so appreciate it. See you next time.